There's so many different types of gravy, and it just adds so much flavor and nuance to things.
No, I raw dog that stuff.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapon! Now! Charge the lightning field.
In that vein, I'd like to quote something here so that we get everything on the record. This comes from the Ariana Grande song Side to Side, which, if you didn't know, is about getting fucked real hard and not being able to walk afterwards.
I didn't. I'm going to look this up while you're telling me.
In it is a drop-in from Nicki Minaj, who says, quote, "Yo, this is the new style with the fresh type of flow. Wrist icicle, ride bicycle. Come through, yo. Get you this type of blow. If you want a menage, I got a tricycle. All these biflows is my mini-me. Body smoking, so they call me Young Nicky Chimney. Rappers in they feelings, 'cause they feelin' me, parentheses murder. I give 0 fucks, and I got 0 chill in me." Poignant, I think, and timely.
Classic, really.
It's the great bard. You know, it's like treading the boards at the Globe, you know?
What does she mean, though? I don't understand.
We really need to break it down in a scholarly fashion to interpret.
We could then get into like the desire to have intercourse, either duration or we'll see depth of field or fervor that thus causes pain afterwards. Is this a desirable after effect?
Right, yes. And is it actually pain, or is it sort of like the desirable, exhaustive? I mean, this is a rich text.
It's like the jungle, Ulysses, Ariana Grande.
It's definitely Ulysses, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and then Side to Side. Catcher in the Rye. But so far, no Beatles have been killed because of Side to Side. But, the day is young.
Ringo, watch out.
Ringo's still out there.
Glad we got it. We got that squared away.
In case there's a deposition later.
Sausage, salad, and side to side. It's the 3 S's, really.
That's the name of the episode.
Yeah. Welcome back to Dispatch Ajax. This is Jake.
I'm Skip.
We are coming back to this. Oh, go ahead.
No, go. You go, bro.
No, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything. You have an idea. This
is Midwestern podcasting. No, you go.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So our last episode, we were getting into the history of Archie comics, and we're kind of slowly making our way through them, getting a sense for who and what they are and why they have been so impactful and so long-lasting. At the end of last episode, we came up to the tail end of the 80s, so we're going to jump in to the 90s and follow along here. So in 1990, we got adult versions of Archie and his pals starring in a live-action TV movie. This was Archie to Riverdale and Back.
I remember these movies coming out. I forgot these existed.
Yeah. Yep. That was a TV movie directed by Dick Lowry, who did all that stuff that you love.
Of the Spice Empire.
The guy who did Smokey and the Bandit 3.
Oh, the third best one.
Second assistant director pickups on Piranha. So,
Wow, Exalted.
Just the best.
Tommy popped it on that one.
Indeed. I need to get rid of the side-by-side. It's in my stuff. So that featured grown-up versions of the Riverdale Gang and aired on NBC.
Right.
Did not do well.
No.
Surprisingly.
I remember that being a really interesting thing because this was in that very specific period in which Tim Burton had very successfully adapted Batman. Then Warren Beatty tried to do his Dick Tracy thing. And so they thought this strange, sort of surreal, nouveau technicolor on-screen adaptation of these properties would work. Only Tim Burton seemed to be the only one that figured that out. Except for maybe the Flash TV show, maybe. But they were so weirdly grotesque, sort of pantomime versions of Archie. I remember thinking it was so bizarre that nobody looked real. Everything seemed artificial, like they took actors and then did them up to be these characters without them looking that way naturally, you know?
Well, not as much as like a Dick Tracy of the same time, but there were no flat tops.
Well, no, there were no little faces or anything, but I felt like it was in that same vein. It was like the made-for-TV version of that, where it was like badly conceived, trying to make these people look the way they look in the comics, but in real life through makeup and prosthetics instead of just casting a redhead, you know, which you could have done very easily, you know, that kind of thing. That's what it felt like. I remember thinking it was just really grotesque and trying too hard.
Yeah, it also didn't help that they made them all embattled and unhappy characters who were dealing with stuff like divorce, struggling with their jobs, like real adult issues, things that we'll come back on this pod dealing with Archie in a bit.
Right.
But it didn't ring true to the longtime Archie fans at the time.
It kind of felt like a weird, cynical writer who's upset about his station in life and was like, what if they were like how I've gone through my life, you know, or like, yeah, I bet today he'd be all divorced and he'd be unhappy and his job would suck, just like all of us. It didn't have anything to do with the actual characters. And also not one of those like, well, we have to make it sort of like a realistic, grounded update like they tried to do with Christmas Story.
Yeah, it did not work.
No.
As many things in the 90s were panning out for Archie, another thing that didn't quite land was despite what was going on around them in the 40s and in the 90s, John Goldwater had said that Archie comes in as sort of the antithesis of the Superman, as Archie should be a champion of the everyman. But superheroes at the time that Archie was created and in the 90s were the thing, dominating the market and the comic book shelves. So it didn't really raise any eyebrows when Archie had licensed their MLJ superheroes in 1981, and DC then launched its imprint, Impact Comics, using these heroes, as Archie was like looking like, let's stay relevant, let's give the kids what they want right now.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about Impact. In the previous episode, we had talked about how these characters do pop up every like couple of decades or every decade or so. It's funny that they throw it all out there and be like, okay, fuck it, DC, you do it.
Yeah, similar in the early 90s, they were looking for, again, more ways to boost sales. And like, what else can we do with Archie? Let's do some weird sci-fi stuff. Kids like that right now. So let's do things like Archie 3000 or Jughead's Time Police, which give you some really, really bizarre storytelling.
I have never heard of this. This is a period I am oblivious of. Okay.
Well, it didn't last long.
No shit. Lasted about as long as Cherry 3000.
Cherry 2000 is pretty good. Say Jughead's Time Police lasted a whole 6 issues.
Can we get Jean-Claude Van Damme to star in this?
And Archie 3000 ran from 1989 to 1991, a total of 16 issues.
Over 2 years? Wow. Or 3 years?
Really banging it out. And if you ever happen to find any of these, the stuff's weird. All right. It's just out there. But this is kind of what, Archie was doing. He was trying to like moving away a bit from comics. We're kind of like getting into new ways of selling these things, with our digests, on different shelves, but we still need to stay relevant. We need to try and find something, a hook that's going to last. And when those didn't pan out, they went with licensing. First, you had a small run of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, this is licensing the cartoon show.
Not the Laird and Eastman stuff, but the cartoon. Okay.
No, it's the cartoon version of the characters and the show done in comic form. It's kind of this weird comic turns to cartoon, turns back to comic, weird Ouroboros. But
yeah, it's the High School Musical, the TV show, the musical movie. Yeah, but I mean, you could see why they wanted to do that. Kid-friendly, sanitized version of the comic of Ninja Turtles turned into that cartoon. And so you could see why that would appeal, they would think, to the base of people who liked the sort of kid-friendly Archie aesthetic and gestalt. But I think their biggest problem in this point is that they're sticking too much to the aesthetic and framework of Archie as it had been and trying to shoehorn different stories into that framework instead of sort of rethinking the whole thing.
That's possible. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that Archie did last 72 issues, so it ran a while.
That worked well.
And it did well. They didn't do a whole lot of prints, so they're kind of tough to find. On the secondary market, they do pretty well, but it's nothing in comparison to their biggest licensed property. That would be Sonic the Hedgehog. we're going to go down our little furry blue rabbit hole for a bit as we get into Sonic the Hedgehog.
Let's refrain from using the words furry and hole in the same sentence from now on. How about that?
As I get further into this Archie Sonic stuff, that's going to be impossible. It is explicitly in there.
At some point, Jake literally becomes a furry.
It's not my thing. I've got friends that are furries, and that have at it,
Apparently, they party hard.
Tough to clean up, but that's not my thing.
It's not for us to know.
It's like the different barbecue sauces. I may not agree, but, enjoy your meat however you like it.
If you're using that analogy, you'd be like, I prefer my mascot sex this way instead of the way that they do it. Maybe it's just more like, hey, it's a spectrum, and good luck, and Godspeed.
Godspeed. I mean, that's pretty.
Well,
it's pretty fast. Let this thing last.
Sonic the Hedgehog, man.
Oh, yeah, that's a different type of ring that he's going for.
So many things we could say there. I'm not going to bring about it.
So we're in the early 90s right now.
Whoa! Everything's neon all of a sudden. Wow! Jake and I are in the early 90s.
It's pretty bodacious.
Everything is teal and tastes like blue raspberry.
Oh, I got to open up my Trapper Keeper so I can tell you the rest of the script here.
That I drew a yin and yang symbol on in magic marker.
Yeah, we haven't moved on to that S that was on everything.
I was literally thinking that too. It was like, it was either that or the yin and yang.
It was the next step.
I gotta get home to my beanbag chair in a clear plastic inflatable recliner. I bought it Seventh Heaven.
Babylon 5 is going to be on soon. Gotta jump in there. The arcade systems are coming into the home. So we have Nintendo right now is the only game that's really kicking ass in town. They've been doing really well. And Super Mario Bros. 3 is the best-selling game of all time when it comes out.
As seen in The Wizard.
Yeah. Do they do Super Mario 3?
It premiered in that. The first footage of first gameplay anyone had ever seen from that game, it was a tie-in with that movie. They showed in the trailer, and then we
need to put a pin in that. Let's come back to the Wizard sometime with its power glove and everything.
Yeah, that's something I'm surprised we haven't talked about very much.
Well, it's out of sight, out of mind. But come back, gentle listener, and you may just hear about it sometime soon.
It's an interesting turning point. This is when the console wars start, where we're trying to enter the home market. Atari's already had several iterations of their home consoles. The Commodore 64, Intellivision, Coleco, they're all sort of on the same plane. But this is where the moment where Nintendo starts separating itself from the rest.
Yeah. At this point, Nintendo's the dominant force in the market. But there is a young upstart that may try to challenge them. A little company called Sega.
Or most appropriately in their commercials,
it's just not picking up on the microphone. I never know what you're saying.
I'm not falling for this again, Jake.
So, like I said, Nintendo's big on the scene, but Sega's coming out. They have this killer hardware that they think can beat Nintendo. They can beat them in speed, they can beat them in graphics, but they don't have something to really sink their teeth into and sell to the masses. That's when they get a pitch from the tech, these artists Naoto Oshima and programmer Yuji Naka. Now, they had an idea, so Sega snapped them up and with some refining created their new mascot for the system, Sonic the Hedgehog.
Because Nintendo had Jumpman, which was the character in Donkey Kong, who then later became Mario.
It's me, Mario.
An Italian plumber written by a Japanese guy. Is it cultural appropriation or just stereotypes? I couldn't tell you.
The latter, I think, but that's fine.
Sega found its Mario in Sonic.
Yeah, but their Mario, with their upbeat music, the bright visuals, Sonic's design and his cocky attitude were really like that, pushing the boundaries of what video games could be in the home, but it was done in a way that parents were okay with. It didn't make them uncomfortable. And, like some other games that we spoke about before, if we're comparing it to Mario, both side scrollers on the platform, but this was slick, it was poppy, it was an upgrade from what Mario could do. It was fast, adrenaline based, and exciting, which a lot of people felt Mario wasn't. I didn't play much Sonic. I don't really know much about Sonic, so this is kind of a bit of a rabbit hole for me to try to decipher this and then regurgitate it to you guys. I do not know Sonic. Didn't play. It was a little too fast for me as a little kid, and I didn't have friends that had Sonic. The few people I knew that had Sega systems, they were more like I was talking to Skip earlier about Earthworm Jim or Altered Beasts. It was more that stuff. Didn't really play Sonic.
The Genesis stuff, as it goes along, it gets increasingly more complex and graphically intense, and you still have your what they now refer to as Metroidvania side-scrolling adventures, which is a pretty common standard thing during this era. They really start playing with that form, and like Earthworm Jim would be later Genesis stuff. Altered Beast would be early Genesis stuff or leftover from Master System. So like there's this moment where they finally realized.
So are we talking like no jack required kind of vibe, or is this...
Well, basically, like, they finally realized what the capabilities of the hardware are, and they really started, and game developers really started pushing, expanding what that could do.
Right, yeah, I was just making a Phil Collins joke.
Yeah, I know, I don't like Phil Collins, so...
Oh, good, just no selling. Appreciate it. You wanna chop me up with an axe while we're at it?
Do you read Sutter Kane?
Do I?
It'd be a sledgehammer.
Skip likes to think that he's cooler.
I was.
What they did think was cool was Sonic, as they had a number of spin-offs that would be produced for American audiences. They did games, merchandise, books, cartoons, anything they could license, Sega did it. And this starts for DIC's first outing, which is simply titled The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. This was a cartoon that began airing on September 6, 1993. Again, this starred Sonic along with his buddy Tails, and they would fight Dr. Robotnik and his goons Scratch and Grounder. Now, this is kind of a Sonic Looney Tunes kind of vibe to the show. It did well enough to inspire a spin-off game, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine.
Tails, they introduce, his name is Miles Per Hour, as in miles per hour.
Ah, man.
In the beginning of each of those games, he's credited as if he's a real person. And he had two tails and he could do helicopter stuff, but he was the companion to Sonic. Also, in the original version, Dr. Robotnik, his name is Dr. Eggman, translated from Japanese originally, because he is egg-shaped. And the origin story, as printed as a comic book insert, was that Dr. Robotnik was doing some sort of experiment. He experiments on animals, and he did some sort of experiment where he gave this hedgehog some enhancing drug or whatever, put him on a treadmill, and then he actually ended up going so fast that like all the stuff exploded, and he, quote, went cobalt and became blue. And then it also caused Dr. Eggman / Robotnik to go insane and then use all of his scientific rigmarole to create cybernetic creatures out of normal animals. And so the point of those games is you have to like save the animals and turn them back into organic animals from being cyborgs, like they're Borg or something. Well, you need to know that because now we get into Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which is literally just Dr. Mario, but a more fun game.
Right. So there are many things from this show that stuck around. Things like Sonic's love of chili dogs, which has stayed around with the franchise ever since.
Such a weird thing.
Yeah. Adventures was originally supposed to be the only DIC show, but apparently they had some problems with their network and needed to create another show. This show eventually became Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
Or Sonic the Morning Sat AM for like fans on the message boards and whatnot.
This always confused me.
This began airing the same...
They were at the same time.
Sat AM?
No, just the fact that there were two shows.
Right. This began airing the same month as Adventures, but it was a huge departure from the wacky tone of the other show. Instead, Dr. Robotnik is a real legitimate threat. He had taken a hold of the planet and was converting most of the inhabitants into mindless robot cyborg slaves. And instead of Sonic being a solo hero, he was now part of a rebel uprising, part of the freedom fighters who are working to fight Robotnik despite the intense and unfathomable odds.
Put those two shows on paper side by side. Which one do you think appeals to you and I more? The Terminator-esque, futuristic, post-apocalyptic thing, or the one where they run around and talk about how flowers are pretty or whatever?
Yeah, with the chili dogs. Huh?
With the chili dogs. Behind the Tasty Freeze.
Oh, Jack. You don't know nothing.
He's a cougar.
So this also, it's the Cougs. This also introduced other beloved characters, including the first prominent female character of the franchise, Sally and Bunny. And it is still thought well of today. This ended after a couple seasons, but it teased potential continuation with a new villain and a third but a third season never came to be. Many of these unused third season concepts did trickle down into the next iteration of Sonic storytelling. Now, the show was popular with fandom, but the creators still had plenty of stories to tell in the world. According to one of the show's writers, Ben Hurst, at least part of the blame can be laid on the redheaded stepchild of the 90s Sonic cartoons, Sonic Underground. Now, Sonic Underground, it was the last of the DIC cartoons and aired at the very start of 1999. Underground differs radically from its predecessors in both tone and plot, and bears very few of the hallmarks of the franchise, save for Sonic.
Right.
Sonic is depicted rather differently here than in other stories, and the world burning around draws very little from the games around the time. There's magic amulets, and prophecies, and class inequality, and a band, and identical siblings, and trying to find a lost mother. There's a lot going on.
Whether or not it's a cartoon, on paper, that's a show that like you and I would have watched in syndication.
Yeah, it's possible, but I don't know how much of like the gem and the holograms inspired Sonic band I'm super into.
Yeah, that's kind of lame. Yeah.
According to Hearst, who is recounting his time on the show, Underground was cooked up by DIC in an attempt to capitalize on music royalties and potentially profit from the show's songs. Hence, the creation of the band.
So this is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming out of their shells tour of Sonic.
Archie did it first, then the Turtles did it. Hanna-Barbera did it many times.
Archie leads the way, carries the torch, forges the path.
Apparently, this show was creatively bankrupt churn job with a bunch of inexperienced freelancers hired on the cheap to produce in bulk with no enthusiasm or vision. Perhaps not without all merit, but it seemed to lack creativity and execution. But this wouldn't be the definitive version for many kids at this time of the character. No, that would come in a license deal with Archie Comics that would prove so strong it would make Archie's version of Sonic the longest running comic-based property of all time.
Licensed property into comics.
Yes, yeah. This comic series, was originally designed as a promotional tie-in to drum up hype for the upcoming cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Guardians of the Galaxy writer Mike Gallagher, who had just wrapped up a 3-year stint at Marvel, was at the time penning Alf.
That is a resume that I wish I had. I mean, think about that for a second.
Yeah, he was writing a comic based on the Alf sitcom. Now, Archie Comics had picked up the license to Sonic and seemed to think that Gallagher would be a great fit here.
But he kept smashing watermelons.
They contacted him to see if he'd be interested. To hear him tell it, he was a little thrown off by it. He'd never heard of Sonic before, but he was excited to work with Scott Shaw, who they had already gotten nailed on to do the pencils. And he was hungry for work being a freelancer, so he agreed. Archie Comics said, hey, great, you have 1 week to send us a finished script. Here's 3-page Bible about the characters in the series. So, hey, go make it happen. Gallagher did manage to make it happen. He turned it around in time, and they began a 4-issue miniseries that was later collected into a volume called Sonic the Beginning. Now, this is kind of a weird collection of stories. Most part, you get what you'd expect, a handful of zany episodes with the gang kind of battling Robotnik's scheme. But then you'd get... But then the final issue was kind of a what if Elseworld where Robotnik grew up with Sonic.
Oh, they're doing the whole Daniel Craig Spectre thing. Come on.
Yeah, weird. But the guy had the 3-page. Here's like what Sonic is, and he made up 4 issues on the spot. So they're doing all right. The miniseries did pretty well. Archie Comics officially started publishing full-length monthly Sonic comics starting in July 1993. Now, Archie Comics Sonic that first shipped out then, meaning it actually predated the show that it originated from.
That's pretty funny.
Make that make sense.
Yeah.
Now, the comic was a continuation of Gallagher's work on the miniseries in a lot of ways, because Gallagher himself stayed on writing the stories. Unfortunately, Scott Shaw did not migrate with him to the book. He was replaced by Dave Manick, and Sonic Morning Cartoon Show's storyboarder Art Mahwini, among many other people, of course.
His name is Art. I guess that's appropriate.
Many of the early issues are, again, zany, episodic things, vehicles for puns and kind of some mean-spirited humor. It was kind of like, Blue Alf in a lot of ways. Was how it started.
Now I really want to go down a rabbit hole about what Blue Alf would be. Like, so many different ideas here.
Hey, can we get a Blue Alf for the table, please?
Oh, man. I can barely walk today. I got a Blue Alf last night.
He's walking side by side.
Two side, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, totally, it was at odds with the cartoon now that was going on, but the higher-ups wanted to be silly and lighthearted. As the story goes, despite borrowing characters and story elements from the Saturday morning cartoon, the writers were instructed to stay more in line with the comedy and overall vibes of the first cartoon and the first comic miniseries. This is how we ended up with stuff like the series opening on Robotnik, the heartless military dictator who enslaved an entire planet, beating up a piñata of his teenage nemesis, grumbling about how much he hates Sonic the Hedgehog.
Is it a piñata in that sense or an effigy? I would imagine an effigy, unless it literally candy falls out.
I think literally candy falls out.
Okay, all right. Well, that answers
he's beating on it with a yeah.
Yeah, it's his quinceañera, and yeah. Okay, fair.
So by September 93, the Saturday morning cartoon was airing, but people immediately gravitated towards that. The Saturday morning cartoon was the first bit of Sonic media available to American fans to actually have a story. The next closest thing to that was a minimalist cutscenes in Sonic 3 that wouldn't hit shelves until February of 1994. Now, while the Saturday morning cartoon isn't exactly grim dark, it's definitely considered more serious in tone to the early Archie Sonic. Now, it's really impossible to talk about Archie Sonic in any way without eventually circling back to Ken Penders. This is where we get, if anybody knows about Archie Sonic, Ken Penders is a lightning rod, we might say, a touchstone.
Is he the Jim Shooter of Sonic comics?
Well, you'll find out in due time. But, coming back to a recent episode where we discussed the life and times of one Jim Shooter.
We kind of eulogized Jim Shooter.
Deceased.
Yeah.
Now, Ken Penders started working on Archie Sonic's on issue 11. He was a writer and contributor all the way up to issue 159.
Good.
He also, he also wrote various of the special issues and most famously all of the Knuckles, the Echidna solo books, which ran for 30 issues themselves. We will get further into some of the legal issues with Ken, but we'll just we'll work a little bit through Ken's ideas for the series here. Now, as Ken tells it, his start at Archie was uneventful. A collaborator of his, Mike Kantorovich, had been tipped to write the comic, having never heard of Sonic the Hedgehog, but he did give it a shot. In the interest of brainstorming, Mike called Ken, who recognized Sonic as his son's favorite character, and he decided he'd pitch a few stories too. Kantorovich departed the series, and Penders, for whatever reason, decided to stick around. Now, it's not quite clear what made him decide to stay in the book. Penders has famously admitted to never having played Sonic the game and not caring about him in the least, but Penders stuck around for obviously a great long while. Now, I don't think Archie never had a formal lead writer until later down the line when Mike Gallagher unofficially filled that role for a decent stretch of time. Following his early time in the book, Gallagher's relevance to it would sharply decline. The rate of his contributions to the book took a nosedive following issue 50, with stretches up to 20 issues, with the story showing up outside the off-the-panel gag comic that appeared on the comic's letter page. Officially, Gallagher's final story was printed in issue 185 as a backup story. Now, this is generally accepted as something that Archie itself would do, publisher-wide. Archie in the early days were known for buying up stories in bulk and just publishing whenever they needed a little bit of filler for their comics.
Cheapskates.
Again, Kantrovich, who brought Penders on, he stayed up until issue 38, and he'd worked pretty close with Penders, but when he left, Penders kind of took the reins. And this, again, is when kind of some of the controversy and stuff starts to pop up. Now, he did write many of the solo series. Sally, a popular Sonic character, back in February 1995, Tails in October 95, and Knuckles in May of 96. Sally, or Princess Sally Alicia Acorn, was initially drawn up as the female lead of the cartoon and a love interest for Sonic. She was voiced by Kath Soucie, and she served as the leader and the tactical...
She was the man-at-arms of their rebellion, yeah.
Yeah, of the freedom fighters, so she was kind of like the head. She was, in fact, the franchise's first female lead character, just barely beating out Amy Rose. Sally was portrayed as being competent and clever, and really, at least by the fan base, thought of as a great character. But Ken Penders didn't really think so. So when Ken Penders took over, he started to deteriorate the way she was characterized. He didn't want to commit to having her be Sonic's love interest, and wrote her as both kind of clingy and nagging and standoffish.
Good, the feminist perspective.
Yeah, well, oof. In the 3-issue series that he wrote about Sally, away from the main cast, on a side adventure with yet another group of freedom fighters, she was accompanied by the infamous Jeffrey St. John, a character that he wrote. And Penders came up with that he would later claim that this character took Sally's virginity, quoting it as the one story that he could never tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't good, and fan reception reflected this. The comic sold pretty poorly, and no one ever officially explained why. But Sally was a popular character. She was also a girl, which in a largely male-dominated demographic, maybe caused some hesitancy by. They also kind of drew Sally kind of look up like a generic furry. I don't know if you know what Sally looks like, but here is...
She not the pink one?
Picture of Sally.
I remember the pink one. Oh, okay. What? Really?
Yeah. I think Sally was kind of like a chipmunk furry kind of thing. I mean, she was Sally Acorn.
She's like a Chip and Dale's character.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I don't know.
This is such a bizarre era for Sonic, too. This is... What a weird time. All right.
Yeah. So then we get to 1997, and things weren't looking too good for Archie Sonic. The cartoon, really the mother series for the book in a lot of ways, was canceled back in 94 and dropped syndication by its home network. ABC's entire animation block had gotten the chop in favor of churning out Disney cartoons,
which they don't make anymore.
Yeah, Sonic was trying to hold off against the marketing god of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but it wasn't enough. Now, it had also been since the last major Sonic release for Sega, being Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It seemed that Sonic Mania was beginning to die out. As the Sonic comic was careening towards cancellation, which seemed inevitable, Archie lost a good deal of its creative team's contracts in an unspecified warehouse accident.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. So they all drew up, quote, replacement contracts, which were hastily rewritten without much thought put into what went down on the paper and was signed.
Okay, so I understand if it was like a labor dispute or something. A warehouse accident? What does that mean? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I assume there was some fire in their warehouse and they lost the contracts that they had all of their comic staff.
And nobody had any digital copies or...
Well, we're dealing with the 90s. You store everything in one file folder, and then when your dog eats it, it's gone.
I can't. But the other party didn't have their own copy of the contract?
Yeah. I do not know, but this will...
What the fuck?
This will come back up later.
What are the other possibilities there? That is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I think we need them contracts to fall off a truck, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's stuck in the middle with Hughes playing while they've got the artist tied to a chair.
Put a pin in that.
Okay,
That's gonna come back up later. So these Archie Sonic comics aren't doing well, and some of the writers at Archie made a decision. Rather than sitting around waiting for the axe to drop, they were going to try to give this big dramatic series finale and let the characters and the creative team go out on their own terms. Everybody wanted the comic to keep running, but at least this way, if and when the Sword of Damocles does fall, the fans will have, the ending and some closure before things wind down. At least that's what Ken Penders had in mind. This arc is largely acknowledged as being primarily his baby, and pretty much everyone in the know says that he is the only writer to have worked on every issue in the arc. Major plot beats and arc were written by him, save for one big change, which again we'll discuss later. Now, it was hyped up in previews and later pages. The in-story buildup was pretty minimal, if not completely non-existent. Archie number 46 had some vague, ominous foreshadowing, but then smash cut to Archie 47, they were launching into the 4-issue arc about the grave final battle that was going to be happening. Almost like if you were reading, you'd be like, wait, did I miss something? It just kind of jumped into it. The Freedom Fighters and their allies, Sally goes on ahead as Sonic rushes off to go do something else. Blah, blah. I just looking at my notes and man, there's no way I'm getting through all of this. There's so much that I don't even know. There's a lot of these characters that I don't even have any grasp of, so I'm just like talking about them.
This sounds like a weird Reign of Fire type, or like some sort of Terminator Apocalypse thing.
Okay, and so in this Endgame, which is what they called it, Sally dies.
Jesus. I imagine a comic cover of Sonic holding Sally's broken body, crying, like Crisis on Infinite Earths number, what was it, 6?
Or yeah, imagine that at least the way that Ken wrote it, nobody really cares.
Fair enough.
The fandom was very unhappy and voiced their displeasure. Some fans took action and protested. Archie and Sega were bombarded with letters, fan protests, and petitions of varying tones, from angry to heartbroken, but all were unified in their desire to see Sally return to life in the pages of Archie Sonic. There have been multiple explanations for Sally's death. The consistent through line, though, seems to be that a discomfort Sally's ability to take Sonic down a peg, which Ken didn't like. He killed Sally off because she, quote, cramped Sonic's style and made him a second banana.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Somebody's a divorced dad.
Yeah, there's a lot. He also reinstated Sally's father, King Maximilian Acorn, to the comics, which usurped Sally's position and made her unnecessary.
Well, she's a woman, so she's usually unnecessary. According to this logic.
Ken would then spend most of his time the next year working on the in-production Knuckles comic, which left him very little time to progress his story, which we will get to. You'll hear about in a mini episode about the replicant Sally that he wanted to make.
What is this lore we're dealing with here?
I know. So this left the story to the other Archie Sonic writers who already had their hands full with their own plans and was eventually smashed and gotten rid of by editor Justin Gabriel's request that the Endgame have a happy ending, or at least one that didn't ruin a year-long mislead. There are also rumors that Sega were at least responsible for saving Sally, citing marketing plans for her down the line, which does make sense. Sally was the mascot for Sega World Sydney, where she also starred in a live stage show called Sonic Lives in Sydney. And so they didn't want their fursuit mascot done away with.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Before they could utilize her.
This alone is a lot. A live stage performance? Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have so many things I'm curious about now.
Despite Endgame essentially being seen as awful by the fan base, it did stir up a lot of attention for the Sonic comic, and sales numbers began soaring. In an ironic twist, that very comic was intended to serve as the series finale, had instead given the book the boost it needed to become a fandom and industry mainstay for the next 2 decades. But this sales-boosting explosion finale was a bit of a double-edged sword. They'd drawn a lot of press attention, but they'd done so by killing off their main villain and changing the comic status quo. With Robotnik dead and a whole lot more to come, this allows us to break up Sonic Comics into 3 big parts. You have the early section, a lot of one-shots around 20 to 25, the comic started to become a larger storytelling vehicle. And around Sonic issue 25, Amy joins the comic. This builds up to issue 50, which is Endgame. Also, this is where start having arcs and spin-off comics at this point. This is essentially supposed to be the end, but Sega wanted to fix things, so afterwards they kept expanding the stories and side characters into more complex stories. Starting with issue 60, things kind of go off the rails. Archie contracts out positions instead of a standard writing and drawing team, so every 3 to 4 comics, the story and art are significantly different. It's also here that the comic has some of the wildest and most unique plots and art styles. The 3 or so main writers wanted the comic to go in vastly conflicting directions. So in one comic, we are doing one thing. 2 comics later, we abandon that arc entirely. Characters are here one day, die the next. When someone else takes the wheel, then the original writer is back and boom, they miraculously survived secretly and are back. The longer the narrative gets, it gets super confusing, and most of the game tie-ins are crammed in, only making things worse. Now here we get some arcs. Sonic and team go to school with humans. Okay, that happens for 2 issues and then is never talked about again. You get a whole lot of multiverse Sonic stuff, also trying to explain how humans live in Station Square with the Starry Night, but are never seen on the surface of Mobius. Sonic has a bunch of different girlfriends. Then we see Sonic be banished to a distant planet for 5 comics, and then sent back. This kind of goes on and on like this up until the second kind of big break in the comics is around issue 160. So about issue 150, the writing just gets off the wall. Plus, Ken Penders has his series canceled. Archie stops the multiple captains nonsense and promotes Ian Flynn, the permanent writer. The next issue is used to stabilize the comic storyline, as well as bring in what many readers consider the best of Archie comics. Characters like Shard and Scourge become mainline. Several strong story arcs, including one of the most memorable ones, The Rise of Mecha Sally, are put in here. It then starts getting really intense, and you get on the brink of major turning points in the story when the lawsuit, which we'll talk about in just a minute, forces Archie to make major adjustments to the comic. Everything gets hardcore rebooted, hundreds of characters are dumped from the lore, and everyone's backstory gets reset. Again, put a pin in that. We will be back to it in just a second. I just want to get through this last thing. The third big change is what's called New 252. The comic has good writing and art from peak Archie and gets back to the Freedom Fighters core, and the characters plot out right out of the games as requested by Sega. Archie made a good job trying to get the comic to work again with Sonic Unleashed and Lost World storyline, but the more lawsuits and lagging sales mean the comic kind of stops suddenly around 190. You get Sonic Universe that starts up alongside this. Now, this has a lot of the stories from the main comic characters that are given screen time while not clogging up the main comic line. There's like Shadow and Team Dark stories, Chaotix, Silver, a lot of concurrent stuff that ties in with the main Sonic thing storyline. The Sonic Universe then reboots at the same time and equally ends at the same time that the main comic does. Why does the main comic end? And why do we get all these reboots? Most of this is because of the lawsuits. Online, you're going to find a whole lot of people discussing about Ken Penders and these lawsuits, and you get a like back and forth depending on which sides of the fandom that you find yourself on. Essentially, Ken Penders had been working on the comic, and essentially Ken saw that they were utilizing some of the stuff that he had written and the characters that he had worked on, and were putting them in the Sega games and using them in different licensed properties. And he had looked at his newish, quote, contract, not the original one he signed, but the new one that he had signed after when they hastily wrote one up, and was like, wait, no, all of these things are mine. I own the license to all of these, and I should get royalties for all of this stuff. And if Sega or anybody wants to use this, they need to pay me. Now, they went through a protracted legal battle that lasted a while, and man, there's so much about that. but Archie sued him when he tried to collect royalties for all of these things. Archie ended up losing and had to settle with Ken Penders. Now, there's a lot, like he was trying to get money from Sega and BioWare and Archie.
BioWare?
There's a lot in there. Go check. Yeah, they were working with Sega at the time. He claimed a lot of the stuff with Knuckles, like he claimed it as his own. He then tried to take some of those characters he had made or written the definitive versions of and make his own stuff outside of Archie Comics or Sega's thing. But after the lawsuit, Archie was out. We don't know exactly how much money Ken got from this, but it must have been somewhat significant or cost prohibitive. And they were kind of in legal limbo with some of the stuff they did. So that's when you get the big reboot. Up until like that 150 issues that Ken had been writing, they erased all of that. All of the characters, all of the backstory, everything that he had been involved with, they essentially wrote out so they wouldn't have to deal with any of that.
That's a Sonic drama right there.
Oh yeah. There's a whole lot of that. Again, Archie were unable to produce original copies of the contract with Penders, nor those of any other artists they had worked on Sonic with, which opened them up to future lawsuits. And are in after the 2013 lawsuit with Penders was ended. In 2016, Scott Fulop, who had been a writer on the Sonic comics after Penders, he started suing for the same stuff. Eventually, his claims were dismissed in the defendant's favor, saying that they didn't have sufficient evidence for their claims against Archie.
Oh, that's fucking crazy.
This was a ton of stuff going on at this time. So they rebooted all of that stuff, got rid of Ken Penders' weirdness, his weird like Nazi influence stuff, his weird
okay.
Knuckles Jesus allegory stuff.
Oh wow.
His weird furry sex stuff that he had kind of put in there.
You should never let forum posters run an actual franchise. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, this is basically just like 4chan or like Reddit, like fan fiction in nutbags running an actual franchise.
Yeah, after the fact, he got pissed that like eventually another company takes over and Penders says, that's all derivative social justice warrior vomit that they're writing. I mean, you kind of get an idea of what he's all about.
Ugh, god damn it. Too woke is
you
what
also
he's
get
saying.
around this time. Yeah, Archie sales are declining. They do a big When Worlds Collide, that is this big crossover with Sonic Universe and Sonic, gives them a boom, but then they crash. So eventually Sonic ends with, I think, issue 275, and due to the lawsuits and the sales dips, you have Archie focusing their time and money on different things, and it's also rumored that Sega's was asking too much money to re-up their licensing deal with Archie. So Sonic then moved to IDW, and if you look at the sales charts, they massively overperformed the best of what Sonic was doing. Sonic generally, in its best of times, in the 2010s through 2015, maybe they'd get up to 12, 15,000 issues sold. When IDW Sonic start, it shot up to around 22,000.
Wow.
It did come back down to around the 12 to 15 mark, but in general, they were doing much better than Archie was able to do for much of their run.
Which explains why you see IDW trying to do the Sonic Justice League crossovers and all that.
Yeah. In 2008, Sonic the Hedgehog was outselling many of the core Archie titles. They even were able to do into the 30,000 unit range, according to some websites.
That's a big number.
I don't know if I saw that. Archie Comics Digest, which again were targeting different fan bases, they were generally outselling Sonic and the main Archie Comics, usually doing about 10,000 units. Again, pretty big numbers.
Yeah.
But when IDW started, they're selling around 21,000 copies. Really kind of blowing old Archie sales, which had been declining over years, to dropping under 10,000 copies an issue by 2014. So legal disputes, loss of focus and declining sales, and IDW freshness took Sonic out of Archie's hands. But Sonic was a big mover for Archie Comics for many, many years. Again, lasted over 20 years of giving them consistent sales. Maybe not always hitting the highest highs that they wanted, but it was, like I said, the longest ongoing licensed property in comic form. Really killing it, and I think allowed Archie to sustain in some of its leaner times through the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
Before they had some big changes.
Which is what's coming up, yeah.
Yeah. Sonic was never like industry leader or a flagship necessarily for the book, but it did provide them with a consistency and a fan base. I think it allowed them to tap into a fan base that may not have been as aware of Archie Comics before them, and allowed them to keep sales consistent enough to stay afloat as a larger entity.
And I do think that is kind of ironic because as much turmoil and lawsuits and drama that mired that franchise, that series, and still it was the only constant thing in Archie sales.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Archie still was selling other things, and we'll get to a little bit of what else was happening in the 90s into the 2000s before Archie really turned a corner and did something completely different.
It certainly does do that.
It certainly does. Yes, yeah. We will finish up what was supposed to be a single episode look at Archie Comics history, as we so often do, became at least a 3-parter.
Because
the stuff's there.
The material's there. Yeah, we didn't plan on it being this long, but when we dug into it, there's a rich history here, and it's much more complex and complicated than everyone gives it credit for, unless you really understand the industry. So it's an interesting deep dive. It goes from family drama, nostalgic stuff, to pseudo Scott Mitchell Rosenberg stuff mixed with Jim Shooter and Stan Lee. And then now we haven't even gotten into the renaissance of Archie yet, which is the next and final phase of this, I hope.
Yeah. And dear listener, we will cover that on next episode.
Yes.
Of Dispatch HX. And we hope that you have enjoyed this weird offshoot deep dive into Sonic lore.
But mostly Sonic comic lore.
Yeah, mostly Sonic comic lore.
Yeah.
We essentially didn't touch the video games at all and offhandedly discussed the cartoons. Not even like the movies. That's probably the biggest thing about Sonic now. You got the movies and live action.
Yeah, but the movies are like the thing I care about the least, so whatever.
Yeah, no, I don't really have any affinity for Sonic much in general.
It's a whole universe in and of itself that has literally nothing to do with the video games. We'll address that later. It gets deep and dark.
And we're not even Ken Penders' search history, so I don't really have much of a skin in the game. It does seem like he
he sounds
maybe
like
more of a negative influence.
Yeah,
but,
he sounds like Zack Snyder in that sense. He encouraged a huge fan base, but it may be against what everyone else thinks about the franchise. Just like Zack Snyder. Like, yeah. Well.
Yeah. Not good. Not good at all. But you know what we do hope is good was this episode and the next episode that'll hit your earwaves quite soon.
And quite frankly, we hope that most of our episodes are good. Just like to throw that out there.
Most of it. We're not. It's a hope. It's a prayer. But we hope that you guys have enjoyed them. And if you wouldn't mind sharing, subscribing, perhaps even rating us 5 blue holes on the podcast app of your choice.
Furry holes.
Ideally, furry blue holes. FBH. On the podcast app of your choice, ideally Apple Podcasts, is the best way for us to get heard and thus seen. It really gets our name out there and gets some buzz, some word of mouth. Lets the bots on X follow us.
The Russian neo-Nazi bots. That's our biggest demographic, apparently.
I love how they've officially come out and said that officially there are more bots on Twitter now than there are humans.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone knew it. Now they just can't deny it.
Well, I know, but now they officially. If they're officially saying they've crossed over the 50% mark, then it's 90%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's great.
The world's great.
Doing great.
Everything's going really well.
We're loving it. But until AI, which is also a podcast, truly takes over and ruins your feed and all of your podcast, we're here for you, fellow human.
We're still people.
We promise. We're not replicants, I promise.
So, are we human or are we dancers?
Dancers?
I mean, that's tough. That's tough. I'm going to go with human.
You would, though.
Well,
that's why we can't trust you.
Hey, look, I may be more human than human.
Hey, I got a Dragula.
All right. Yep. Why not?
All right.
Dig through those ditches.
Skip, before you slam into the back of my Dragula, what should the rest of the audience do?
The second dirtiest thing you've ever said to me, twice, two things in this one recording. Please make sure that you have cleaned up after yourselves to some sort of reasonable degree. Make sure you have tipped your waitstaff, your bartenders, your KJs, your podcasters. Make sure that you support your local comic shops and retailers. And from Dispatch Ajax, we would like to say Godspeed, fair wizards.
No, I want to see it.
Please, go away.